Chapter 36. At last, the sun. The words and their meaning wormed their way into Oli's mind. Jakal Kali, you've been waiting? Being here in this place awoke the language of the wild in Oli, and he found he wasn't struggling to find the right words. They appeared in his mind as if there all along. The statue smiled. Whatever Oli had been expecting, Starodavna was not it. The cloak, all Oli had ever seen before, was made of a black stone that somehow shifted as Starodavna moved, animated like cloth. But Starodavna herself had skin made of ebony wood, carved into the shape of a woman. The wood rippled and textured to show off muscle, bone, sinew. But the smiling face was the most vexing. Ianolia ipravia. I have been preparing. She, or it, spoke through a lipless opening which shifted as a mouth should, but inside contained only black void. Above the mouth-like opening were two diamond-shaped holes for a nose, and above those were two eyes. One eye was entirely white, textured like a porous stone, rolling around as it followed Oli. The other was not an eye at all, but a jagged pit in the black wood, the edges discolored and flesh-like, shifting subtly with each move of Starodavna's head. What is she saying? Tal asked, but Oli ignored her. They were close now, under a bowshot away. With no breeze, he could likely put an arrow wherever he'd liked, but it would be risky. The pedestal Starodavna stood on raised her up above the kneeling prisoners, but Oli dared not risk hitting his mother at all. His mother. She sobbed hysterically, but also screamed. Her face was red, and there was a small pool of blood forming beneath her. Oli ground his teeth and walked more quickly. Kali miet. Sorry, 1 second. Kali miet alopato. You're hurting her. Kilast Kali pist. I had to be sure you would come. Liafrahijma. I am here. Klom kiadi iano. Yes, you are. Miet osa. Let her go. Noch. No. Oli didn't need to hear anything else. He hadn't come to parley, to talk to this thing. He'd come to kill it or die trying. So Oli ran, rushing forward, closing the distance with terrible speed, putting himself in easy bowshot range in heartbeats. There were no roots to contend with, and the charred stumps were easy enough to avoid. So the vines sat limp against the ground, lifeless as Oli ran over them. Oli pulled back the bowstring, his side screaming in pain from the wound he'd taken from the bear. He loosed his first arrow, watching it slam into Starodavna's wooden chest, right where her heart should be, assuming she had one. She jerked back under the impact, body shifting through her, though her feet stayed unmoving on the pedestal. And then she laughed. A cackling, cracking sound as if each pulse of laughter was the breaking of a tree branch. Ziach! Oli screamed, knocking another arrow. Silence. Words continued to pour into his mouth as if it was his language, and he had never known another. Starodavna twisted her hands so her palms faced up, then raised both hands in unison. The princess and Oli's mother were lifted into the air, the vines ensnaring them around their torsos, now raising them before Starodavna. She used them as shields. Orelda screamed, tears flowing down her cheeks. Run, Oli, run! Oli did run, but not away, not this time. He ran closer now, less than 20 paces away. His heart thudded, but he felt good in a wild sort of way. Focused. Tal loosed an arrow from behind him, and it cut through one of the vines holding the princess aloft. It did little good, though, for vines held Leone at a dozen different points. With one excruciating motion in which he thought his side may burst with pain, Ollie pulled back his bowstring while at a dead sprint. He loosed the next arrow, screaming out, "Ziach!" as though he could infuse the word into the arrow's shaft. Stardavna tried to shift Orelda's body in the way, but the vines were too slow. The arrow found its target, pummeling into Stardavna's open mouth and jerking her whole head backward, the sound of cracking wood ringing loud in the air, reminiscent of breaking bone. Orelda and Leone dropped, the vines holding them, going limp. Leone rolled the moment she hit the ground, forgetting her knife and yanking her sword free. Pain riddled her whole body, but she was on her feet and breathing and free. Tal ran to her side, pulling her away before she had even gotten her footing. The ranger's eyes were bloodshot and scared. "Princess, come," she said, grabbing at her wrist. But Leone could not. She looked backward toward Stardavna, the thing of power and terror, stone and wood, all black and all otherworldly. Somehow more frightening than the Yelmes, able to penetrate minds and control beasts. Leone had to stay. For what else could she hope? For what else could she hope to challenge the Dark Ones, but with the power that had done it before? "We need her," Leone said, pulling away. It was why she had come. "We'll die. Without this power, my father cannot hope to..." The ground beneath their feet cracked and shook, and thick vines jutted out from the dirt, thrashing wildly, cutting off Leone's words and Tal's arguments. Ollie had nearly made it to his mother. Tal had charged in toward the princess, but Ollie had gone wide, suspecting a trap. He couldn't possibly have killed her that easily, and he wasn't so stupid as to think he would actually win in the end. He'd been right. Stardavna had waited until his caution gave way, until he ran toward his crying mother. She lay on the ground, hands stretched toward him, tears of pain rolling down her cheeks. Her legs had been torn up too much for her to walk, eyes red, hair sticking to her face in sweat-laden strands. "Ollie!" Their fingers had been a hair's breadth from one another. The vines rose from the ground like hands of the dead, enveloping Orelda instantly. Ollie sidestepped, withdrawing his hand off reflex and running again. Vines swarmed around him, and Stardavna laughed and laughed. She spoke no words, only twisted her hands about, controlling the vines as if using puppeteer strings. Her mother flew into the air again. His mother flew into the air again, screaming as vines yanked her between Ollie and Stardavna. The vines moved faster than any had ever seen before, thrusting themselves out like whips, aiming for his back, his throat, his head. He took it all in, the squirming vines, his mother's shifting form in the air, the glimpse of Stardavna and her smile. His arrow still protruding from her mouth like a feathered tongue. His instincts took over. Vines were unable to grab purchase on him as he moved, but over and over their outstretched thorns sliced through his calves, ankles, and thighs. Dozens of little cuts poured forth droplets of blood. Ollie yanked another arrow from his quiver, words running from his mouth as freely as the blood flowed from his open wounds. He spoke in the language, drenching the arrow in the first words that came to his mind. They were the words he'd used his whole life to fight the pull of the call. "Palmedets bievli." Remember who you are. It was less a call to remember who he was, and more a war cry to fight off the call, and the wood, and everything in it. A heel brought down to crush a vine or a snake, a way to say, "I will not go quietly." In a place that swam in forgetfulness and lies, those words were a pillar for the Strayazar and their hounds, to stay sane and alive. A vine grabbed Ollie's ankle and yanked him to the ground. He held his bow, but dropped the arrow as he pulled his knife free. cutting the vines in one slash and fighting to stand. Vines swarmed all around him, hungry and writhing. Some tried to wrap his legs. Others snapped outward to cut and lacerate every inch of exposed skin. Oli yelled, his voice mixing with his mother's. There were no words, just the unintelligible guttural calls of violence and anger. The vines came from everywhere, and in moments they had engulfed him and brought him down to his father's grave. Bringing him down to his father's grave. He would die and his mother would watch. Moonlight dimmed as the vines canopied over him. His knife flashed outward in a forever whirlwind that left oozing stubs of the vines, which were replaced by more vines. It was never enough, a struggle without point and with one sure end. His whole life boiled down into a single pathetic moment, and no amount of rage or hate could make any difference. And then steel slashed through vines above, and moonlight poured back in. The princess roared as she cut through the forest of writhing vines, her face red with heat and sweat, her eyes narrowed. The princess's sword formed an opening between Oli and Stardavna. The vines held Orelda to the side, as if the ancient monster had wanted to watch Oli die with her own eyes, and his mother had been blocking the view. But that meant that there was a clear line of sight for him right now. Oli dropped his knife, snatched the arrow from the ground. Vines gripped his knees and waist, wrestling him down, but Oli pulled the bowstring back. His shoulder blades closed together, and pain from his sides stole the breath from his lungs, but he refused to stop. Oli released the arrow. He could feel it go forward, could feel part of himself fly away with the arrowhead, could feel it find its mark, and then Oli crumpled into the embrace of the vines, the tension leaving his muscles as thoroughly as it had left the bowstring. Oli's arrow punctured Stardavna's eye, sending a dozen little white stone pieces flying into the air. And then, nothing. Leone blinked as Stardavna appeared frozen in time, unmoving. The vines stopped moving too, not falling limp as before, just freezing. Leone cut through the ones nearest her, and disconnected tops fell away and thudded to the ground. Orelda no longer sobbed, her body limp in the air where the vines held her, chin resting against her chest. The woodsman made no sound either, trapped beneath a canopy of frozen vines. Leone almost started cutting them away to free him, but she would just as likely cut into him. Tall breathed unnaturally loud, the ranger saying nothing and yet begging Leone to leave all the same. The sound of wood cracking pierced the silence, and long cracks began to form in Stardavna's wooden skin. They started slowly at first, as if something inside was trying to hold the seams together. Eventually, they quickened in their breaking. Something was coming. Leone could feel it. Stardavna began to pulse with light. No, that was not right. The dais she stood upon pulsed. A sickly green light formed a sort of language that grew bright and then dismissed. Then it grew brighter again and dimmed. Leone recognized the script, but she did not know how to read it. She had seen those same letters back on the high table of the High Tholos. The vines dropped, then going fully limp all around her, like a few dozen stage actors all collapsing on cue. Orelda's body hit the ground with a crunch. Tall ran up beside Leone, and this time she let the ranger drag her away. Oli crawled to his mother. It was all he could do, all he had strength for. His body was cut and broken, and whatever power he had kept him moving beyond his limits. That had left him. He only wanted to see her, to hold his mother and feel her holding him back. To know that once, just once, he had saved someone. But Orelda didn't cry any longer. She didn't move or make any sounds at all. In the pulsing green light, Orelda lay still. The fall had been far. She had already been weak. Before Oli had reached her, he knew what he would find. His tears drenched the soil as he crawled to her, his sobs drowned out by an ever-increasing hum emanating from Stardavna's now twitching form. Oli didn't care about any of it. When he got to his mother, he wrapped his arms carefully around her neck, and he dragged her close to him. And Oli wept. The green glow pulsed viciously, its pace quickening every moment, like bubbles in a cauldron of water with a roaring flame below. First, there were 2 or 3 flashes of light, and then dozens of flashes every few seconds. Leonie could feel an explosion coming, could see it in the violence of the light. The shivering of Stardovna's body, energy permeated the air, and a low hum invaded every inch of space around her. Leonie and Tall stood at the edge of the clearing, watching as Oli clutched his mother, the 2 of them turning into silhouettes in the light of the dais pulsing. Leonie thought she could see Oli's shoulder shuddering, his head rocking. And then everything exploded.